Okay, we'll go ahead.
All right, awesome. Hey, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Rogowski with Northern California SBDC, Small Business Development Center Network for Finance Center. And this is our live Q&A. This is our tri-weekly updates that we have. Session 15, May 8th, still National Small Business Week. And we're all in this together. We have a great call for you today. Lots of great information from a guest speaker. A quick introduction, Northern California SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, were funded by SBA, Small Business Administration, and the Governor's Office of Economic Development called GoBiz. And because we're funded, we come to you at no cost, so we can help you with one-on-one advising and also educational webinars, which we have for you here today. Again, my name is Scott Rogowski. I'm the director of the Northern California SBDC Finance Center. Also have the Associate Director, Sunita Maharaj for the Finance Center, and we run a team of experts, loan experts, that help you navigate the arduous process of getting financing, especially in this disastrous time. Quick agenda, a lot of stuff on here, but the most important thing about this call today is that we have a guest speaker. We have a human resource expert and Northern California SBDC regional advisor, Chana Anderson. And she's going to introduce herself, quick little bio, and then she's going to go into an amazing presentation of a lot of great updates around payroll and human resources. And then you can see the rest of this stuff. We'll go over all the loans that we normally do very quickly. And then there's some cool stuff that we're doing in Northern California with partnering with some attorneys to get better information to you faster. And then obviously our Salute to Small Business video that we shared earlier this week. So here's our guest speaker today. So we want to thank you very much, Chana, for being here today and presenting to our small business owners and giving them some great information. Take it away, Chana.
You want to stop your share?
Thanks, Scott. We'll let Alan, we'll stop that, and then I will jump in with the share here.
And while you're doing that, please, everybody, put your questions in the Q&A. We will be triaging them from there rather than in the chat. So please have a look in the Q&A, see if somebody else has asked the question, which will get the answer similar to yours, and just upvote it rather than asking your own, because we normally get literally hundreds of questions in one of these sessions, which we're unable to answer them all. Go ahead, John.
I love the fact that the Q&A already has like 25 questions in it. This is great. So Scott mentioned, my name is Chana Anderson, and I am a regional advisor with SBDC. I've been in the field of human resources and employment law for about 25 years, really kind of guiding clients and talking about employment law and how business owners of all sizes, but of course my heart is with small business owners, can navigate these laws with precision. So let's just jump right in, because there's quite a bit to cover in our time together today. Clearly, the workplace and the world that we are in has changed. There have been over 50 unique employment laws created throughout the nation, including states and local ordinances, in the past 8 weeks. Unemployment is at double digits. There's even a recent study put out by the Gartner Association talking about the fact that remote workers have increased by 25%, and that's regular routine remote working. Very different than what we had in the past. You and I are eating takeout more than ever, DoorDash, Instacart. Stock prices for Netflix and Zoom are at double digits and an all-time high. Everything has shifted. And that also includes the workplace and the world that we're in. Some of the items that we're going to talk about today are new regulations, legislation that came in, then it was regulation, and we are literally refining it as we're going along. There's an adage that's been said many times, which is we are building the plane while we are flying it, and that is literally the case. So I share that with you because some of the things we'll talk about today, they are current as of right here, right now, today. However, in a few days or in a few weeks, we could have further guidance from some of the regulatory bodies around what this really means. So I'm starting to get really comfortable going back to clients and saying, remember what I told you a week ago? That's not quite right. Let's talk about what it is now. So keep that in mind with this information in the weeks to come. So here's our agenda. Probably as robust as Scott's, but I think we can make it through. We're going to talk a little about sources of truth. I want to dip into furloughs and layoffs because some clients still aren't quite reopened yet. The ever-present question around pandemic unemployment assistance, sheltering in place and why that matters when you think about reopening your business. The focus on employer health and safety or employee health and safety, because that's a key component of the workplace now. We'll also talk about some other considerations for the work environment, as well as what we're calling Family First Coronavirus Response Act, but most of you really know it as emergency paid sick leave and the emergency or expanded paid family medical leave. It's really core as you're reopening your business. And then last but not least, we'll do some local ordinances. Sources of truth. These are really critical. And what I have on the screen for you are OSHA. You'll also see the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, Center for Disease Control, Department of Labor. These are really critical and they matter. Information is everywhere. You and I can do a quick Google search and find out just about anything we want and shift that information to meet our need. But when we're thinking about the workplace, we all need to have anchors, those sources of truth that we will continually go back to. And if you look at all of these logos, what you're seeing is these are the lawmakers, these are the regulators, these are the people that are holding us accountable in the work world for running our businesses appropriately. The reason we also want to use these as our anchors or sources of truth is because it helps us to minimize risk and liability, and it gives credibility to the policies and procedures that we put in place in the organization. It also allows us to be consistent and have practical application of what we do. You'll notice that there are two other kind of logos on this slide that aren't necessarily regulatory bodies, and that is the one that says Littler, and then there's another one called Morgan Lewis. I'm also a fan of using law firms, in particular legal websites, as my source of truth. And that's because these national, reputable, longstanding law firms have a great resource. What they do is they take some of this legislation and regulation that you and I look at, and they break it down into easy to understand, bite-sized articles, which we can then grasp and wrap our brains around. And even better, usually in the footnotes of their articles on their websites, they have links, and those links go all the way back to the law. So in case you're one of those people like me where you like to stay up late at night and read through legal text because it helps to put you to sleep, then you can do that through these links on their pages. So think about what your sources of truth will be and how you'll utilize those in your workplace, not only to educate yourself, but to make sure you're compliant. We have a resource page for you, and I think Alan's either already uploaded that in the chat or he'll talk about where that is a little bit later on. So you too can access some great resources for your business.
It's going in the chat right now.
Yay, thank you, Alan.
I'll also put a copy of this presentation in there as well.
Perfect. Let's start with definitions. I hope that all of you are having your businesses resume. I think it's critical. We truly need that. We miss those small businesses. But if not, I want to take a moment to clarify these two things. They're very, very different. And I've seen so many times over the last 8 weeks that we are using them interchangeably. And as all of you know, we live in and we work in the People's Republic of California, which means we are different than every other state. And that is exactly the case with furloughs and layoffs. So in California, a furlough is temporary. It actually has an end date. It is not something that goes on in perpetuity. It usually involves a partial absence, or maybe it's a 1 full week absence. Employees, they continue on their benefits, they continue to accrue time off, they can use their time off. Most importantly, with a furlough, under California law, a furlough cannot extend beyond 10 days or the pay period in which the employee was furloughed. So let me say that one more time. Under California law, the furlough cannot extend beyond 10 days or the pay period in which the furlough began. So if you're thinking about, hey, I need to have my people not work for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I might call them back, or I will call them back, that's actually not a furlough in California. That becomes a termination and immediately moves us over to the right-hand column where it's a layoff. So if you have an indefinite amount of time where you're not sure where your staff are coming back or when they're coming back, even though it's your intention, it really moves them into the layoff category under California, which means we need to give them a final paycheck. We need to pay out any accrued paid time off, except for paid sick leave. We need to make sure that we cease any benefits that they have and then provide them with that unemployment handbook. If you've already laid your staff off and maybe you called it a furlough, that's fine. I mean, it's kind of already in the past, but just make sure that you've paid out any accrued PTO, any accrued but unused PTO they have, and that'll bring you into compliance. But that's a really important distinction for us to have when we're thinking about furloughs versus layoffs. So let's take us forward. The other common thing, the other common topic that I always want to talk about is the pandemic unemployment insurance. And this is the element or the carve out in the CARES Act, where now business owners, including partners I learned yesterday, as well as self-employed and gig workers, are now eligible for that additional $600 per week from the federal government. In order to be eligible for that, those folks have to be unemployed due to a COVID-19 reason. There's a pretty lengthy list of that on the EDD website, but in essence, if your business has been closed, if you're subject to quarantine, if you can't work, all related to COVID-19, then you can be eligible for that additional $600. You apply for it the exact same way any of the rest of us would apply for unemployment, which is through the EDD portal. You want to make sure you list all of your sources of income. I believe they're working to update what that looks like. And then EDD actually goes and they verify your sources of income. So you don't need to submit any extra documentation. The other piece that people really want to know about is, well, how much money am I going to get and when do I get it? And as you can see, there's a three-phased approach, right? There's phase one that started early on, which is that flat 167. And then in phase two, that's the 13 weeks of $600 per week that the federal government is subsidizing. And that again is from March through July. And in order to qualify for that, you have to meet that minimum threshold of income during the prior 18 months of $17,368, whatever your combinations of income were, whether it was through a sale, through your independent contracting, or maybe even some W-2. If you meet that $17,368, then you're eligible for the $600. And then we slide into phase three, as you can see, where the 13 weeks is over, and we're back to that other flat amount of 167. So clearly this is something that's important for people. They want to know if they're eligible, and the federal government has made that eligibility available. And now EDD and the other state unemployment departments are working their way through the applications. Related to unemployment insurance, there's a couple of questions that we frequently get around whether or not an employee can, in essence, not come to work because they want to stay on unemployment. And so what you see on the screen here is actually from the Department of Labor website. They've uploaded several FAQs related to this pandemic unemployment insurance and the questions that they're getting from the community. And this is a live one that I think was put on the website maybe about 3 days ago. And as you can see, an employee is saying, my employer has asked me to come back, or my employer has offered me work, but I'm not sick. No one in my household is sick, and I don't have a child to care for. I just am really concerned for my own health, and I don't want to go back to work. Can I still be eligible for that $600 under the CARE Act? And the Department of Labor has been really clear saying, no, you're not eligible for it because it doesn't meet any of the reasons that we are providing that $600 related to COVID-19. So that does not make them eligible. And that's a really critical point. And I think that could be helpful in conversations with our employees about whether or not they come back. Speaking of coming back, let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. So what we've got now are shelter in place. And this is our lovely map of the Northern California SBDC region. And as Anne reminded me yesterday, we are 36 counties strong in this map. So you probably are residing in one of these counties somewhere in Northern California. And what that means is there is a shelter in place that is unique to your particular county, 36 different ones. And so often with these shelter in places, we look at maybe the synopsis from the media, or we look at the synopsis maybe on a government web page. But I really want to call out that it's critical that you actually look at the shelter in place order for your local county and understand what it says. I'm going to give you an example. In the Bay Area, those 7 counties have really come into alignment. So we're thinking about Alameda County, San Francisco County, San Mateo County, Marin County. Some of them have really aligned, and their shelter-in-place ordinances are all very much the same. But that is not the case for Lassen County or Sonoma County or Amador County. So if you're in one of those, what they're requesting of their business owners is very unique. For instance, in Sonoma is requesting business owners in their 24-page shelter-in-place guide to actually have an exposure control plan and a social distancing plan. And they provide samples of that. And if you happen to be in Emeryville, masks are required, but masks are not required in Sonoma. So it's really critical when you're thinking about bringing your business back online or expanding your business or making a modification, that you take a moment to read those shelter in place, understand, are you an essential business? How do you fold into that? And what do you need to do to comply and keep your employees safe? So if you are opening, which again, we hope you are, maybe you're modifying your business, we want to think about what do those new work practices need to be? How do you have people engage in the work environment to keep them safe? And what we've got here, I know it looks a little lengthy, there's a 10-step process, but first and foremost, start with the sources of authority. What are experts saying and sharing about what you should be doing in the work environment? What should you think about how you design your work environment? The next thing is stop and look at the risk. So where could your employees potentially come into contact with COVID-19? What's their exposure? Where might they be shoulder to shoulder with another employee? Where might they be face to face with a client or a customer? How are they physically going to move through the work environment? What do they need to do if they travel? Do your employees have to be in cars or vehicles together? What does that look like? That's part of your risk assessment. Before you can design your plan, we really need to figure out where's the exposure coming from. The third one is even more important, which is understand your employees' concerns. Over the last couple of weeks, I've had an opportunity to participate and review several surveys of employees from companies either from 50 up to about 1,000. All of them talking about expanding their workforces or coming back to work in the next few months. And there's a great deal of fear and concerns from employees and outright, I'm not coming back to work until maybe there's a vaccine, until there's widespread testing, until my employer gives me assurance that I will be safe. So it's very real that employees may not come back to work without assurances and guarantees. And in order for you to prepare your workforce or prepare your workplace, it's good to understand how they feel. I really encourage you to survey your staff, whether it's verbally on the phone, if you're doing it in an email, to understand what's happening with them. Their concerns will also potentially give you ideas about what you can do in the workplace to mitigate risk. And let's talk a little bit more about that. So mitigating risk from an employer perspective is all about how do we reduce the transmission amongst employees? How do you have a healthy business operation that doesn't spread the hazard or continue it or perpetuate it? And then what's your overall work environment look like? And one of the things I really want to share that's starting coming to light is you think about having what we're calling an exposure control plan or a risk plan. I know it seems a little daunting, but we're also starting to see building management companies and building owners ask their tenants for their plans. 3 of my clients in the last week have been asked for whatever their plan is, and that is so the business owners, or I should say the building management owners, can fold that into their plan. So I think there's going to be more and more reason to have this potential plan and have it documented so you can share it when and if you're requested. So back onto the health and safety of our employees. When you're thinking about risk, it's again, how and where employees may be exposed. And what you see on the screen comes from the CDC and OSHA. So there are resources that you can utilize to think about what you want to do in your workplace. And that's on that resource page that Alan has already uploaded. Some other guidance that's come from OSHA is about risk factors. And once we determine the risk of your employees, then you can determine, well, what do I need to do? So clearly, if we have somebody that's in a high risk category in the medical field, their requirements for risk control, gloves and masks and N95 and face shields and gowns and shoe covers, those are all much more than maybe a regular business needs to do. But we do need to understand, are your employees in the low risk category or are they in the medium risk category? Medium risk, maybe there needs to be some plexiglass dividers. Maybe there needs to be hand gloves. If I'm in low risk and I'm primarily working from home, I don't necessarily need to worry about that. So in order for us to determine what to do in terms of our exposure control plan or defining that new work environment, we have to figure out which one of these categories your staff are in. So let's talk more about that new work environment. You are already seeing this. When we think about the physical layout of workspace, consider for a moment, if you've been out of your home, if you've been to maybe a Lowe's, if you've been to a grocery store, if you've been to almost anything these days, there are directionals, right? You look down on the sidewalk or you look down on the floor and there are almost lanes for people like you would see on a street or a highway. So we're really working to create a physical layout that keeps people at a 6-foot distance. We're honoring that social distancing. We're trying to reduce any type of cross-contamination or exposure. So what can you do in your workspace, right? Again, think about directionals, signage on the wall, signage on the floor, right? Those big arrows, using tape to line out how people enter and exit a work environment or your retail store. Tape on the floor to help people understand what that 6-foot distance is. I mentioned barriers. We're seeing more and more barriers. If you go into any type of retail store now, perhaps a corner market, or if you go into a CVS, you will see plexiglass or acrylic shields hanging from the ceiling so that there's a barrier in front of you and that client or that customer. So some things that you too might need to contemplate about, what does that workspace need to look like? Do I need to move things further apart in order to keep people safe? One thing that's also top of mind for us is things that are touchless. Where can you embed touchless in your business? Can you embed touchless trash cans? Can they be touchless water dispensers? Anything where we don't necessarily have to have our hands connected to something else. Even kitchen items. We as humans are very communal. We love a good break room. We appreciate sitting down with our coworkers. We love to be in the kitchen together, maybe in the business kitchen where we store our lunch. Those definitely present hazards for us. And more businesses under guidance from OSHA and CDC are shutting down those communal areas. So if we're having a water dispenser where I actually have to stick my vessel or my cup into it, those are no longer being used. There isn't a company refrigerator where we all go in and out all the time and stick our hands in and out of the refrigerator. So begin to think about all those different things you might need to do in your workplace to give the physical distance and minimize that exposure. And the other thing I want to call out on this slide is really that routine cleaning and disinfecting. How can you do that within your business? Is there janitorial service that comes in and does a deep cleaning? And then there's an initial routine cleaning that happens in disinfecting. Where can your staff be engaged in this? What can they do with their own hand sanitizers and wipes and cleaning materials that you provide that they can help to do some ongoing cleaning? We're also responsible for helping our staff understand hygiene and hand washing and what that looks like in the workplace, and potentially providing protective equipment depending on whether they are high risk or low risk. Also depending on your shelter-in-place ordinance. Depending on where you are, sometimes in the state, employers may be required to actually provide the mask, depending on what the work is. If workers are in that low-risk category, then they can bring in their own masks. Employee health screenings, which we're going to talk about in just a few moments. And then also be really clear about, well, what will you do if one of your staff comes to you and says, I've been exposed or I have symptoms? How might you isolate that person? And what would be your communication plan or even a tracing plan of other workers that might be impacted? And before we move on to the next slide, I just want to share one other thing. Some of you may have seen either through the news or perhaps through the governor's announcement or even on the governor's website, that 2 evenings ago, he changed, or he actually created some new legislation that is quite groundbreaking. And I think all of us are still trying to wrap our heads around what this means. Right now, all we have is the initial announcement and no guidance. And what I'm referring to is the governor signed a piece of legislation about making a presumption that anytime a worker is medically diagnosed with COVID-19 and has been in the work environment for the past 14 days, the presumption is they came into contact or were exposed to COVID-19 through their work at their employer's place of work. So let me say that one more time. If your worker is medically diagnosed with COVID-19 and has been in the workplace in the last 14 days, the presumption is they got it at work, which means this now becomes workers' compensation and it's a recordable injury. And there are so many nuances and tendrils to that we don't even know where it's going to go. But it really heightens our sense of awareness on why we have to have this exposure control plan and why we should be doing routine disinfecting, employee health screenings, and education with our staff. So let's talk a little bit about those health screenings. You're probably hearing more about this in the news as well. You may even be doing this with your friends and your family, which is understanding what symptomology people are showing. And both the EEOC and the CDC have said it's okay to ask employees about their COVID-19 symptoms. Do they have a fever? Do they have a cough? Do they have the loss of taste or the loss of smell? You know, what symptomology do they have? And it's actually okay to ask them this every single day. You can also have them take their temperature. So when you're thinking about your staff in the workplace, it's really imperative that you consider the application of this. Employees can easily do a self-screening in the morning, daily before they come to work. They can do that themselves. And then it's incumbent upon the employee to self-report any potential symptomology. That's one method. Second, some employers are using technology. They're actually using their payroll systems, which have questionnaires. So right before your employee would clock in, or right after they clock in, there's a process or a series of questions they can go through to check yes, no about their symptomology. And then if they check yes to one of those, they're asked to call their employer and they are told not to come into work. So there's a number of different ways that you can do this. I do want to throw in a caveat, one thing to be cautious of, and that is antibody testing. So there's quite a bit of information out there right now about using testing in screening of employees. But there's so much we don't know about COVID-19, and the EEOC has some very loose guidelines on this because we don't know about the validity and the credibility of some of these tests. So perhaps maybe I had COVID-19, but that doesn't mean I can't get it again. So just simply having those antibodies in my system does not mean that I possibly could not infect somebody should I still have any of those symptoms or get COVID-19 again. So just be really judicious and cautious if you're thinking about using testing as part of your screening methods. It also means the employer would have to bear the cost. So keep that in mind as well. So back to our list of some things to consider when you're returning people to work. We've talked about, most of the ones that are on the top. The other thing that's really helpful to think about is training your employees. You've spent the time to think about risk, to think about changes in your work environment, how you want to keep them safe, where the trash cans are, where the hand sanitizers are, making sure you've got cleaning equipment. Now make sure you educate and train your staff. Talk to them about what their role is, what's their responsibility, how should they be engaged in helping to keep the workplace safe. And then any new protocols or procedures you've got, they need that as well. They'll need to understand what you're doing and why. Also understand the trauma that this causes for staff. All of us are in a whole new world. Some people manage it well, others are challenged by it. Some people have concerns with their children, immunosuppressed, fear about elderly parents. So it's going to take people a while to get truly in the groove of being in the workplace again. So we want to factor that in. And number 10, you can never, ever communicate enough. The more you share with your staff, the better. So I can encourage you highly to do it frequently, as often as you can. So assuming that you have got your folks back to work, you've got your plan, you're ready to roll, people are going to start returning. Let's talk about some of the leaves that are out there. And one of the leaves that you may have heard about came out early in March, but wasn't effective until April 1st. It was through the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And in essence, it provided emergency paid sick leave and expanded family medical leave to employees. And so the key word in both of this is paid, right? So paid sick leave and paid family leave. And if your employees are back to work, you may have to comply with this law. Most of you probably want me to jump right to number 4, which is, wait, how do I not comply with this? But I promise we're going to get there. Before we tell you if you might be exempt, let's at least help you understand what you're required to do. So this law applies to all employers if you have 499 employees or less. So 499 or less, this law is for you. And really, employees are eligible if they're under a local quarantine order, meaning they can't work or telework because of this quarantine order. A healthcare provider tells them to quarantine. They've got symptoms of COVID-19 and they're seeking a medical diagnosis, or maybe they're caring for someone under quarantine or that was told to quarantine by a provider, or maybe they're caring for their son or daughter who's under age 18 because the schools are closed. So if an employee has any one of those challenges, then they can be eligible for emergency paid sick leave. Well, how much do they get, right? If I work full-time, then I'm eligible for 80 hours of paid sick leave. So under this law, I get 80 hours of emergency paid sick leave, and this is in addition to whatever my company is already providing. So each of you are probably providing the California mandated paid sick leave. This is in addition to that. It can be combined. We can do the two together, but the employer can't require me to use my California time first or my company time first before the emergency paid sick leave. If anything, it's the converse. Emergency paid sick leave first, and then those other paid time off. There is a cap. And what you can see is the federal government has instituted 2 unique caps. One is for my own self-care. So if I'm taking time off for myself, then there's a daily rate of $511 up to $5,110. But that's only if I make up to that amount normally in my paycheck, right? If I normally make $100 in a day, then that's all the employer needs to pay, right? They don't have to pay me the $511. It's really connected to what my regular rate of pay is up to the $511. If I'm caring for my son or my daughter, or if I'm caring for a family member, then the rate's different. As you can see, it's $200 per day, up to that cap. There's a little bit of math that we have to do in terms of calculating that different rate of pay. And on that resource sheet that Alan has already posted, there's a link to what we're calling the DOL, so the Department of Labor's frequently asked questions specifically around this. And they've done a great job of answering a ton of questions about calculating pay. So I encourage you to take a look at it. And if you really want to get deep into that, you're welcome to connect with one of the advisors, including myself. Next up is the expanded emergency paid family medical leave. Very similar to the first one, 499 employers or employees or less, same criteria with a different exception, right? This time, for me to be able to take this paid family medical leave, I have to be taking time off to provide for the care of my child, right? So it's not about whether or not I'm quarantined. It's not applicable if I have COVID-19. This one is all about care for a child under the age of 18. As you can see, I get 12 weeks of job protected leave. The first 2 weeks of that are unpaid, but I can use any other time that's available through my employer. And then the remaining time is paid at that cap that you saw, right? The $200 per day up to $12,000 for the 12 weeks. So for many small businesses, this would be a huge challenge, right? How are we potentially going to afford this? Under this FCRA, the government has allowed us to do basically dollar for dollar credits, right? So as you're paying out this person on paid sick leave or paid family medical leave, you can do a reimbursement or a credit actually on that exact payroll or on your quarterly taxes. There's even an opportunity to request it in advance from the IRS. And of course, with the IRS, you always need the form number. So you can do dollar for dollar credits up to the caps, and that's that cap that we talked about, the 5,110 or the 2,000 or the 12,000. So all the way around, this is the way they're reimbursing employers for this. You'll notice on here I've got a caveat, or there's a bullet about connecting with your payroll provider. And that's because you'll want to have reports to be able to know if Sean is out on emergency paid sick leave, how much did I pay? How much can I submit for reimbursement or for credit from the IRS? Most payroll systems are already doing this. I know the larger ones and even smaller ones, Gusto is doing this, Paylocity, Paycom. I think QuickBooks has been trying to work on reports for this. So if you're in a larger system, their payroll system should be ready for this. If not, there are some simple reports that you can create to be able to track, but please make sure you track. You will need this. And the piece that you've all been waiting for, which is what is that exemption and can I take advantage of that? That is really a decision for you to make. The Department of Labor has come out and said, here is the criteria. Now you, employer, need to go through that criteria and determine whether or not you are eligible for this exemption. You don't need to send it to the Department of Labor, but you do want to document it. So let's take a look at it. If you're a small employer, under 50 employees, the employee is asking for leave because of childcare, and somebody that's an authorized officer of the business has to make a decision about whether or not the business itself is eligible. And I've already highlighted a couple of things that would truly make it easy, which is the business eligible for this exemption? Because if you provided it, it would cause the business to cease operating at a minimal capacity, right? So providing somebody with this time off and this cost would really create a hardship for your business and you couldn't operate. Or maybe, as we see under number 3, you have a specialty or niche business where there's only 1 or 2 employees that know how to do this. And if you gave them this time off, there'd be nobody to perform it. And in our prior webinar, I used the example of brewers. Maybe you only have 1 or 2 brewers in your brewery or in your pub, and if you gave that brewer that time off, there's no one else to do it. So again, you as the business owner want to think about, does this apply to me? And if you think that's the case, please document it, please write it down, keep it somewhere handy. In case there's ever a question or an audit, you can easily pull this information back up and look at it and say, this is how I made my determination. So hopefully that's pretty clear. Let's talk a little bit more about leaves. Just when you thought I was done with all the crazy leave stuff, I want to share a couple more items for you to keep in mind. Thinking about that People's Republic of California, in addition to our state being really unique, so are all of our counties and cities. There are, I think, over 9 different unique sick leave policies by cities and local ordinances in the state of California. And I've got just a handful on the screen. Berkeley has their own, Emeryville has their own, Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose. Both San Francisco and San Jose have created new paid sick leave policies in the last 4 weeks, just in response to the coronavirus and to fill in any gaps from the federal leave that we just talked about. So you begin to think about, where your business is located and how these leaves might impact you so you can prepare for those. And we're almost to the question, and kind of the Q&A piece. I'm sure folks have lots of questions. I can see the Q&A kind of ticking up there. And I wanted to take a moment just to kind of kick that Q&A off with a couple of questions that I'm constantly getting. And one is, what do I do if my employee won't return to work because of either childcare, health concerns, or higher income from unemployment? Well, we've already talked about the health concern, right? They have to come back to work or they potentially are ineligible for unemployment. If it's childcare, we really do need to have a conversation with that employee because that is a covered reason under COVID-19 and they would continue to be eligible under unemployment. We will find that employees are having challenges getting to the workplace either because of concerns over transportation, they don't have the flexibility, their kids are still at home, they're taking care of aging parents. So in some of those instances where we're talking about taking care of an individual or a child, they would still be eligible for unemployment and not need to come into the workplace. The last piece of this is about higher income. And I know some of you are getting that question around, hey, I earn more money off of unemployment than I will working for you. Why in the world would I come back to work? Well, if you offer your employee an opportunity to come back to work and they refuse, that at some point will come out. EDD typically looks for when the employee can return to work, and they will do audits. Granted, their system is truly overwhelmed right now. It may not be for another 9 or 10 months, but when they do an audit and they ask the employer for information about wage information or about continued employment, and that business owner responds back and says, I offered and they refused, then that person could potentially be found ineligible for unemployment and have to pay all of that money back. And that is something that is fairly common with unemployment. They get their money back through garnishments. And last question is, different ways to spend that PPP money if you are not in the place to reopen your business. Some employers are using it as a retention tool. So they're giving employees paid time off. They're actually paying wages while employees are off to ensure that employees are coming back to work. So when they're ready to reopen, employees are ready and they will come back. You can pay for healthcare costs, benefit costs. Use that time to have your employees develop their skills from home. Maybe there's something you want them to do related to Excel or something for online marketing or whatever that might be. They can use this as training and development time. Maybe there's a new project or initiative that you and your team or your staff haven't had an opportunity to think about, but now there's some time to do it. Maybe they do research for you, or they're developing policies and procedures for how you want your business to operate. So there's a multitude of different ways that you can utilize that money around staff and wages and still have some return. So I think that kind of brings me to the end of my time. I know there's lots of Q&A, and I think Scott and Sunita might have some things to share as well.
Thank you very much, Chana. That was amazing. Lots of great information. We only have 17 minutes left for our call, so I'm not going to really go into a whole lot. And we are, as an organization, probably going to have to extend these calls to like 90 minutes eventually because there's so much great information to be shared. So what I'm going to do is, I know that Alan is going to Alan, you have the deck, so you can share it with people. I'm not going to go, I'm just going to talk for like probably 2 minutes. I'm not going to show my slides because everybody knows what's going on. So you could, you can contact us at loans@asksbdc.com. You can call us at 833-ASK-SBDC for any loan questions. The Finance Center and all the individual centers that we have throughout our region specialize in loans. We have all the answers that you could ever think about for the loan side, for PPP, for EIDL, and for the state guarantee loan program in the state of California. Also, we can help you find lenders for PPP. If you're having trouble with your E-Tran number with SBA, or maybe you apply to multiple fintech, financial technology companies like Cabbage or On Deck, and you have multiple E-Tran numbers, that's coming up a lot. You need to make sure that they have your E-Tran number under your social, that you don't have it under your social, but that you have it under your EIN, your business social security number, instead of your personal social security number. That's coming up a lot. We have access to help you find where your E-Tran number is. So say if you applied for 10 lenders, you're not sure where it's at, we can help you find that. Please reach out to us at loans@asksbdc.com. Also, we can help you find PPP lenders. And then there is, we at NorCal SBDC, we're partnering with some very high net worth and highly skilled, knowledgeable attorneys in Northern California. And we have an Ask SBDC, and they call themselves the Case Force. We jump on a Thursday call. It's office hours, open from 4 to 5:30 for all business owners just to call in and ask questions. It's an open forum. It's pro bono. It's really awesome. Attorneys are answering questions. It's really cool at no cost. And then also, yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to throw it over to Ann Johnson Stromberg. She's the Associate Director of Partnerships. Sorry, Associate Director of Programs for Northern California SBDC Network, and she's going to help Chana navigate through these Q&As. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Chana, a couple things had come up, and they were reiterated in the chat, but and maybe we could also get some clarification from Scott and Sunita on this bit. But can PPP funds be used for paid time off resulting in layoffs? She had talked about furloughs. Some people thought that they were furloughing their employees, but it was over that beyond that 10-day period. So can they use some of that PPP fund to finish up the paid time off for those payroll pieces?
I'm thinking about that question, and I might need a little help from Scott and Sunita, but it sounds like the employees are already laid off and they're wanting to use that money to then, I think, it sounds like compensate them or potentially give them paid time off. So they'd actually have to rehire those employees, which is the intention, right? So rehire those employees in order to be able to use those funds and give them some time off. That's kind of the way I'm interpreting that. I'd be interested to think hear what Sunita or Scott would say.
Let me just clarify. So these are people who had thought that they furloughed their employees because they were going to be bringing them back. But according to your definition, they actually terminated them unknowingly. And now those employees are owed paid time off. So that's what I'm talking about. Does that change your answer?
You know, I probably have more questions than I have answers. I would need to know more. I would need to know more about that particular business, especially if we're thinking about owed paid time off. It would be challenging for someone to be owed paid time off unless we're talking about they had an actual accrual. That would be a one-off. So I probably have more questions, and I would be one of those, you know, let's talk on an off conversation so I can dig in and help.
Okay. Any insight to the question, Sunita?
Sure. So the intention of the PPP is to bring people back to work. So you're going to pay them going forward as of today until the 8 weeks. So that's how the money should be used from all of the documents that I've read. There may be some additional information in regards to the forgiveness whenever that does come out, the new SOP. But as of right now, it would be for when you bring them back, you start paying them today going forward.
Okay. Janet has a great question. Is there a template for the letter that we're supposed to send to employees offering their job back? Can this be emailed? If the job offer is declined, should we ask for a signature? So that's a lot of questions. So I'll just let you answer that bit.
There's not a template for that. I think an email works beautifully. Anything that is in writing. And if it feels more personal to pick up the phone and call one of your employees first, that's great. You can still pick up the phone and call them, and then just follow that up with an email. So I would email them, make a formal offer, ask them to reply back, and hopefully in that reply they will tell you yes. And if they don't tell you yes, maybe they'll tell you why they're saying no, and you're welcome to ask.
Okay. She's also asking, are employees pay half of their healthcare premiums? During PPP, can we pay the employee share as well? And will this be forgiven?
I'm going to answer it from the ERISA perspective. And then I think, you know, the answer I would say is also yes for the PPP, but Scott or Sunita are welcome to join in. I would be cautious about paying the employee portion of your insurance premiums, especially if that is not the way your plan is designed. So there are laws under the Department of Labor and ERISA about who pays what portion from the way your plan is designed. And so if you make a mid-year plan change, that could cause some challenges, some risk in your plan. So if you choose to do that, I would talk to the broker because you may need to redesign your plan in order to suddenly start covering employee portions. And then what does that look like going forward?
And the other piece on that as well is if you didn't do that in the past, then you shouldn't do that in the future. So with that money. So that's kind of how you have to look at things. So how did we use the money before to pay our employees? And that's how you have to look at it moving forward.
Let's see. Otilia is asking, assuming that half of the employees won't want to come back to work, can I pay the remaining employees double during the 8-week period? Will I still qualify for it to be forgiven? Scott's shaking his head no.
So you, unless Chana knows more about, but I think there's new legislation that's going to be presented on this. You can only increase salaries by 25%. So anything over that would not be forgiven. And then you got to be really careful with that 25% increase, because I think there's new legislation coming out next week where that might be different. As we mentioned, Chana mentioned it, I forgot to mention it, but things are changing all the time. When we're talking about it right now, when we put this together, it was true, but things are changing all the time. So there's a lot of new legislation coming out on this forgivability, and we do not have all the answers, unfortunately.
Any idea when yet, Scott?
I'm hoping next week. So we're in the 3rd week of triple P being funded for the first tranche. So next week is 4 weeks into the 8 weeks. I'm hoping it's next week, because people are getting scared and crazy. So I think it's going to come next week.
John is asking, if we hire a new replacement employee because a previous employee decides not to return to work, can we deduct the new employee's wages from our PPP loan forgiveness total?
My interpretation of that would be yes, and I'm looking to see if Scott and Sunita are shaking their heads in accordance.
Okay, great. Some of these are so long, I'm trying to get to the short, easier to answer ones.
I can read through KJ's while you're looking for another one really quick, because this one came up and I know that Chana had answered it, but it seems like a lot of people want to know the answer as well. I just spoke with her advisor in regards to EDD, and then going back to employees to double check to see if they did receive unemployment when they also received a job offer. She says, I can understand why that may be, but is it the first I've heard about it? When they try to rehire their employees don't want to come back, and they're talking about an audit. And Chana did go over that. They will be audited, maybe not in the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks, months, might be a year, but it will catch up.
Okay. Let's see, PPP. We're a bookkeeping and financial management firm, but we're not CPAs. Are we an essential business?
That is entirely possible. Of course, it depends on where you are located. So, right, that goes back to taking a look at the shelter in place for your particular county and reading through the entire regulation. So I'm sorry that I'm putting you for that late midnight reading of like 20 pages or so, but it's really essential that you understand the nuances, and there are nuances in each one of those shelter in place.
Okay. Edna is saying, we're a boat tour for tourists, have 70 people from all over the world on the boat at any given time, all sitting together on benches. What kind of liability do we need to consider?
Even just, whether I think of employees or I think about clients, that would make me a little bit nervous. In this age of COVID-19, the social distancing is a requirement for all of us, whether it's the general public, clients, or employees. So we'll need to begin to think about ways that you can keep your clients apart, which of course means that we wouldn't be able to have 70 people on that boat. So it really will be an opportunity to look at the overall operations. Where are people close together in terms of clients and customers do they need to be? And then what type of protective equipment will your staff need in order to operate? And I would imagine your type of business would likely be in the final stages of the governor's reopening. If people are literally that close together, you might be in stage 4 or stage 5.
Sherry is asking, my front office staff has been called back to work. but they're having difficulty figuring out how to cancel their unemployment. Any help on this?
I'm hearing the same as well. You know, we have this lovely antiquated, you know, system from the 60s that is managing the back end of unemployment. And typically you can log into your unemployment account and you can update your status in terms of whether you're working, if you're partially working. I would just encourage those folks to be diligent and to continue to try to get online. And then we're also encouraging people actually to write letters to EDD and send it in to whomever's been identified as their case manager, so that they're doing both, right? It seems that somehow the mail, the physical mail, is actually getting processed faster than technology. So we're encouraging people to do both. Put things in writing and log back into your account and update your eligibility status.
Okay. Meryl is saying I'm a salon owner and I'm wondering if there are any restrictions that would allow me to open before my phase opening.
You know, the last I heard from the governor's 12 o'clock update was those, you know, type of businesses would be again in the latter stages, stage 4 and stage 5. And those are really jurisdictional decisions, right? They're either going to be from the state government or from the county government.
Okay. Dana is saying, can employees work limited hours and still be eligible for unemployment?
Yes, most definitely. Employees can work limited hours, have salary reductions, and be eligible for what's called reduced unemployment benefits. It really will be the difference between what they're making now and what they made in the previous 18 months. So I would encourage them to apply.
Okay. David saying I own an ice cream store. All my employees were students, college and high school, and for various reasons are not accepting my written offer to come back to work. How will this affect my PPP loan forgiveness? At my level, it's practically impossible to hire new employees. What can I do?
So it sounds like that's a two-part question about hiring and then what happens with the PPP funds. So I'm going to punt to Scott and Sunita just about the PPP funds, and then I can always come back in about hiring.
Sure. So with the PPP funds, you can always give it back. If you're not able to spend it, you can give it back. I believe you have until the 14th to actually give it all back if you're not able to use it without recourse.
Okay. Any suggestions for trying to get employees to, actually, I'm going to offer this suggestion. We had a great comment from Brian Bessold. He's saying that regarding establishing COVID safe work practices and protocols, my partner and I developed a draft document, shared it with our team, then conducted a meeting to discuss protocols, concerns, anything and everything related to the move back to operations. Our team went from a majority of them wanting to remain home to being fully in support of returning to work. Chana, this goes back to the communicate. Any other thoughts on that?
That is spot on. That is totally spot on. We engage our employees from the very beginning, involve them in the process. We try to assuage their concerns and understand how to be flexible. Bravo, because that is totally the way to do it.
Okay. Are there any, you said that there were some examples of return to work plans somewhere, right? Like somebody had put one together. Where was that again?
So that is in the resource page as well. We provided an example by Cushman Wakefield, who did a really good job. They were one of the first out of the gates to provide a nice solid kind of guide for all the things to think about to return to work. And it's the very last entry on the resource page that Alan has uploaded and I think put in the chat a couple of times.
Okay, great. We have a few more questions. Do we want to keep going for a few more minutes, Scott? Or
yeah, we totally can. I just wanted to tell everybody before they jump off that this is our YouTube channel. So if you want to click on this, I know you can't click on it right now, but Alan shared it with you. But the top is our YouTube channel. So if you want to subscribe, you can watch these videos and other videos that we have. So I just wanted to say that real quick. Thank you.
Okay, great. I just want to try to get some more of these questions answered. Jennifer is saying, regarding unemployment, my understanding is that the 167 per week can go up to 450 weekly depending on income. How do we claim this? Is this net or gross?
So the 450 a week is actually the state unemployment portion. That is the cap. So depending on how much you've earned over the last 18 months makes you eligible for state unemployment. And the cap for state unemployment is $450 per week. The $600 comes in is if someone is eligible for even $1 of the 450 or the state's money, then they can also receive the $600 on top of that. And so you don't necessarily need to do anything else other than apply, share your information about your income, and then that is automatically calculated in terms of your eligibility for both the state cap and the additional $600 for 13 weeks.
Yolando is saying, if you're a sole proprietor and took a loss last year, will we still get the $600 in unemployment?
That all comes back to whether or not you met the income threshold. So I understand that most of our businesses, we definitely take a loss, but if you were able to have enough income to reach that 17,000, I think 368, or it might be 638, then yes, you would be eligible for the 600.
Okay. Sidel says, if I close my business, am I still eligible for ongoing unemployment, which I've begun receiving?
If you're already receiving it, that means you have met the eligibility requirement, right? And we are still in that COVID-19 period. And if you recall on the slides, there were some dates, right? So if you were already found eligible and you're receiving the additional $600, meaning you're in the phase 2, then the closing your business doesn't impact any of that because they're considering the COVID-19 period to be through July, and then again through the end of December, I think December 26, 2020.
Okay. Shayla is saying, we are an essential business in Marin County. We had 2 employees stay home because there was not enough business. Now that we received the PPP funds, we're ready to bring them back, but one of them shows signs of not wanting to come back because he has elderly parents and is worried about exposure. At this point, we're ready to replace him and hire somebody else. He was not too reliable before the pandemic. If we move to replacing him and hire someone else, what's the best procedure? Was there a family medical leave thing there that would actually prevent that, Chana?
Well, I think I heard you say that they are an essential business. Was that right, Ann?
Yes.
Right, so they're an essential business, which means they have work for this particular employee, and the employee is worried about bringing home something to an immunosuppressed family member. So they do have that opportunity not to come, right? They have that right, but they are eligible to work. And if they're not staying home for their own illness or somebody else's illness related to COVID-19 or to care for a child, then those leaves actually don't apply to them. And they also would not be eligible for unemployment, right? Because they are able to work.
Okay. Jennifer is saying, I own a non-toxic hair and makeup salon. So my clients find me because they're immunocompromised and or have other allergies or illnesses or chemically sensitive. I'm having nightmares on how to keep everyone safe and still be able to be the artist that I am for them. I've tried working in gloves on a client's wig. It seemed nearly impossible.
I can understand and appreciate the challenge, and I applaud the line of work that you're in. This new environment, this new workspace is going to require all of us to get really creative and think about how we work. So I heard the word wig in there, which makes me think you may be doing some things that are separate and apart and not from your clients. So you'll still want to maintain precautions while you're working on the wigs themselves. And if you are working on clients, just remember that the governor has not released us to work in those type of environments yet. That's like stage 4 or 5 in terms of hair salons. So try to find ways to get creative where you can maintain that social distancing and definitely be the artist.
Dana is asking, do you need to stop working in order to qualify for the pandemic unemployment insurance?
No, not necessarily. It's about whether or not you have been impacted by COVID-19, and it will likely come down to your income amount, so what you're still continuing to earn. You potentially might earn more money and make you ineligible for that 600, but as I've been sharing with everybody, apply. Don't self-select out. Go ahead and apply, put all of your information in, and then let EDD make that determination on your eligibility.
Okay. Fallon, very concerned. How can employers be protected when all the risk and liabilities are on employers? There's not a lot of, there's a lot of concern here. Any recommendations, Chana?
Oh my gosh, and you're right. You're right. This has always been the case for us in business, and most of the time it's the larger employers that have felt this, that burden of employee health and safety, and this is now really starting to shift to all employers. So our protections in this are being transparent. It is taking initiative, and it is trying to have ownership as best you can. And then to that earlier point about engaging employees in the conversation. So usually employers find themselves at risk and more liability when they do nothing, or there's a line that's drawn and they choose to jump over the line. So I encourage you to be proactive, come up with plans, write them down, and engage your staff.
Jillian saying, if married, filing jointly for PUA, what income qualifies for the $17,000 threshold?
And we have now officially stepped outside of my territory because I heard married and filing jointly, which I am not the finance person. So I would be really cautious, and I'm probably not the right person to answer that question. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I believe when you apply for EDD that you have to give your social security number. So your social security number would be tied into that money. Mm-hmm. So if it's both of your money and only one person maybe made $5,000, it wouldn't be, for me, if I made $5,000, my husband made $10,000, or $20,000, it wouldn't be put together. It would just be me filing for myself or him filing for himself. So if you did not meet that threshold personally, then you most likely would not qualify, but I would go to EDD website and double check that. But from a finance part of it, that's how I'm looking at it.
There is thank you, Sunita, there is on that resource page a link to the EDD FAQs. So please take a look at that. There's, again, a whole page that may answer some additional questions for you.
Candy is saying, I own a wellness center where our primary service is massage therapy. Where do I find the expectations for my industry? I'm in Butte County.
I would start with the OSHA guidelines, and that is also on the resource page. There is a link to it. When you pull it up, it's a PDF booklet from OSHA, and that's also where they designate the risk. So for me, I would start with what's the risk to my employee? Is this low risk? Is this medium risk? Is this high risk? And then they actually help you delineate, well, if they're medium risk, these are the protocols and items that you should consider. So start with OSHA and then go right into the CDC website about here's some of the things that you can do. Those two together should really give you a strong baseline for creating a plan.
Okay. Let's see, I'm getting a few people who are, thanking us for this information. We are 10 minutes over our time, and Scott and Sunita have dropped off. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. All of you, I want to encourage you, if you have questions about human resources, please reach out to your local SBDC. You can find your local SBDC by going to NorCal SBDC.org. Type in your zip code and apply for services.
You could do the same thing on the Ask SBDC site. It's actually even easier now.
Right. Well, Ask SBDC is specifically for finance stuff, and the NorCal SBDC is for all other business counseling assistance. So please do contact us if there's more that we can do to help. We will be back on Monday at 10:30 a.m. talking about loan products for all of you and answering all of your questions. If you participated today and had loan questions or that we didn't get to, Would you mind just posting that again for everyone, Alan?
The
phone number and the website.
Yep, I've got them here. Any moment now. Here we go. So 1823 Ask SBDC, emails are loans@asksbdc.com or Espanol ask@sbdc.com, and the website's there as well.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.